car. A sleek sedan now dusted in white, navigated the final, treacherous switchback up to the Blackwood estate. Inside, Jade White gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles pale. The GPS had lost signal an hour ago, and the directions she'd scribbled on a piece of stationery were smudged from her nervous sweat. In the passenger seat, her boyfriend, Mark, scrolled endlessly on his phone, the glow illuminating his frustrated face. Still nothing. It's like we've driven off the edge of the world. He voiced what she'd been thinking. That was the point, of course. Seclusion. But now, in the deepening December gloom, the isolation felt less like a sanctuary and more like a trap. The reunion was her idea. A year to the day since the incident. A phrase they had all silently agreed upon. A sterile container for the rotting truth inside. 5 friends, bound by a decade of shared history and one horrific, secret night. They had not all been together since. Texts were sporadic, group chats dead. The weight of the unspoken had pushed them apart. Jade, the self-appointed caretaker of the group's crumbling foundations, had proposed this, a winter solstice gathering at a remote historic estate she'd found online. A cleansing retreat, she'd called it, a chance to reconnect, to talk, to finally exhale the breath they'd all been holding. She had booked it under a false company name, paid in cash from an account her finance broker father didn't monitor. She'd even found a local guide, a man named Silas, who the estate owner said knew the property's history and could facilitate private ceremonies. She'd pictured a quiet, fireside confession, tears, forgiveness, a ritual of their own making to bury the ghost they'd created. The others arrived in varying states of compliance and contempt. Ava Chan and Pete Rossi came together, an ex-couple whose breakup a year prior had been a toxic, fiery thing that, in the shadow of the larger tragedy, had seemed almost trivial. Now, their interactions were landmines of old grievances, disguised as barbed jokes. Mia Johnson, the quietest of them, arrived alone, her eyes hollowed by a year of what she only called bad sleep. And then there was Ricky Bowen, the group's once irrepressible nucleus, now a sunken-chested version of himself, his laughter too loud, his eyes never quite meeting anyone else's. He'd brought enough liquor for a small army, his solution to every problem a chemical erasure. Blackwood Estate loomed at the end of the drive, a Gothic manor of dark stone and leaded windows, hunched against the gathering storm. It was grand, yet eerily still, as if holding its breath. No welcoming light glowed in the windows Silas had promised to leave on. As they hauled their bags inside, the sheer silence of the place was oppressive. The air was cold, older than the winter chill outside, smelling of dust, damp wood, and forgotten things. Charming, Ava drawled, dropping her designer weekend bag on the Persian rug in the grand foyer. No Wi-Fi password in the brochure, Jade? I'm already having withdrawal. Her tone was light, but her eyes scanned the dark wood paneling and mounted stag heads with unease. It's off-grid, Jade said, forcing cheer. Meant to help us disconnect. Mission accomplished, Pete muttered, tapping his phone uselessly. I'm disconnected from the 21st century. The evening unfolded in a stilted pantomime of normality. They built a fire in the cavernous hearth. Ricky poured heavy drinks. Old, surface-level stories were trotted out. Remember that time in college? But they landed flat, the laughter dying quickly. The real story, the one that pulsed beneath the room like a foul underground river, remained untouched. Guilt was a physical presence among them, a 6th member sitting in the worn velvet armchair, watching. It was Mia who first ventured away from the group, drawn by the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves in the adjoining study. Her flashlight beam danced over leather-bound spines. Then it caught something else. A book not on the shelf, but placed deliberately on a small, ornate reading stand. It was large, its cover made of a leather that felt unnervingly textured, like old skin, fastened with a tarnished iron clasp. She opened it. The pages were thick parchment, the ink a faded brown that looked too much like dried blood. The script was ornate, difficult, but the illustrations were clear. Twisted, shadowy forms with elongated limbs and antler-like horns, standing over cowering human figures. One phrase, in clearer English, jumped out. The solstice walker comes not for sin, but for silence. It seeks the rot beneath the varnish, the lie within the truth. What's that? Jade asked, coming up behind her. Mia jumped. I don't know. It was just, here. She pointed to a detailed drawing of a celestial chart, marking the winter solstice. It talks about something that walks on the longest night. A balance keeper. Local ghost story, Ricky called from the doorway, swirling his whiskey. Probably left out for the tourists. Spooky fun. But his voice lacked its usual bravado. Before they could examine it further, a new sound cut through the house. A heavy, rhythmic thump from the direction of the front door. They all froze. The knock came again, 3 slow, deliberate beats. Silas stood on the portico, a silhouette against the swirling snow. He was an older black man, tall and straight-backed, his face a map of deep lines. He carried no bag, wore only a heavy wool coat dusted with snow. His eyes, as Jade ushered him in, didn't scan the opulent foyer. They scanned them, each face, lingering as if reading a text. "Welcome to Blackwood," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I am Silas, the caretaker." There was no warmth in the title. It was a statement of fact, a warning. He refused to drink, refusing even to sit. He stood by the fire, his shadow immense on the wall. "The owner said you sought a private retreat. For a ritual." He said the word carefully, tasting it. "May I ask its nature?" Jade faltered. "It's personal. A gathering. To put some things from the past to rest." Silas's gaze rested on Ricky's jittery hands, on Ava's defensive posture, on Mia's haunted eyes. "The past does not rest," he said simply. "It waits. And this place, it amplifies what waits." He gestured vaguely to the dark windows. "You have chosen the longest night. The night the veil between what is seen and what is hidden is most thin. Old stories say a walker stirs. It is not a demon of hellfire. It is a force of nature, of consequence. Born from the first lie ever told, it grows stronger with every secret kept, every truth twisted for comfort. It does not punish evil. It hunts dishonesty. It seeks to tear away the varnish we paint over our rotten parts." A tense chuckle escaped Pete. "So what? A supernatural therapist? Comes to make us share our feelings." Silas turned his impassive eyes to Pete. "It comes to restore balance. If your hearts are heavy with unspoken things, you have lit a beacon for it. This night is its domain. The ritual you may have planned, it is child's play. The only ritual that matters now is truth. Full, ugly, unforgiving truth. Spoken aloud before the dawn." An uncomfortable silence descended. Ava broke it, her voice sharp with manufactured disdain. "This is ridiculous. We're paying to be scared by campfire stories? I came here to get away from stress, not get a lecture from the help about mythical lie detectors." Silas didn't flinch. "I am not the help. I am the witness my family has provided for this land for generations. I am here to tell you what walks here. What you do with the warning is your affair." He looked at Jade one last time. "The journal in the study speaks of it. It is not a story. It is a log, of visits past." With that, he turned and walked back into the blizzard, swallowed by the night. His departure left a colder chill than his arrival. The group stood in stunned silence for a long moment. "Well?" Ava snorted, striding to the sideboard to pour a defiantly large drink. "That was aggressively weird. I am the witness. Dramatic much, but the bravado was thin." Ricky had gone back to the journal, his earlier mockery gone. He traced a bone-like illustration with a shaking finger. Mia hovered near the window, staring into the blinding snow. Jade felt her carefully constructed plan, the gentle guided conversation, the therapeutic release shatter. Silas had introduced a new variable, an external, impending judgment far more terrifying than their own guilt. "He's trying to scare us," Mark said, putting a hand on Jade's shoulder. "It's part of the experience, like a haunted house." "Then why did he leave?" Mia asked softly, still facing the window. If he's an actor, wouldn't he stay to haunt us? The question hung in the air. To escape it, Pete suggested they explore, break the tension. The house was a maze of rooms. A dusty ballroom, a library with shelves empty of books, a kitchen with a cold, giant hearth. In an upstairs hallway, Ava found a child's nursery, a porcelain doll staring blankly from a crib layered in dust. Nope, she whispered, backing out. It was in the cellar, reached by a creaking door off the kitchen, that the atmosphere curdled from eerie to menacing. Ricky and Pete went down, claiming to look for more firewood or forgotten wine. The single bulb illuminated a low-ceiling space of stone walls and earth floor. Crates were stacked haphazardly, and in the center, clear of debris, was a circle drawn in what looked like dark ash or soil. At its cardinal points were small, odd objects. A twisted root resembling a hand, a tarnished silver bell, a bird skull, and a smooth, dark stone that seemed to drink the light. What the hell? Pete murmured, shining his phone light. Ricky stepped closer, then recoiled. It's cold. Like, physically cold coming off it. He wasn't joking. A palpable, localized chill emanated from the circle. A pocket of deep winter in the already cold cellar. Pete's light caught something at the edge of the circle, a modern item. A silver pendant on a broken chain. He picked it up. It was a simple locket. He pried it open with his thumbnail. Inside was a tiny, water-stained photo of a young woman with dark hair and a bright, smiling face. A face none of them recognized. But the feeling it evoked was universal. It was a face full of life, a life that had been ended. They both knew it. A wave of nausea, unrelated to alcohol, hit Ricky. He stumbled back, knocking over a crate with a crash that echoed through the house. Upstairs, the others froze. The sound from below was wrong. It wasn't the noise of exploration. It was the sound of accident, of panic. Ricky? Pete? Jade called, her voice tight. When the two men emerged from the cellar doorway, their faces were sheet white. Pete clutched the locket in his fist, not showing it. Nothing, he said, his voice strained. Just knocked some stuff over. This place is a death trap. His eyes met Jade's, screaming a silent warning. The discovery changed everything. Silas's warning was no longer an abstract folktale. It had a physical anchor. The circle, the locket, they were evidence of something. The journal was no longer just a book. It was a manual. And the unspoken guilt in their hearts now had a counterpart in the world. A hungry presence they had, perhaps, invited. As midnight approached, the storm reached its peak. The wind howled like a chorus of lost voices, rattling the ancient window panes. The fire seemed to fight a losing battle against the cold seeping from the stones of the house itself. They huddled in the main room, the journal open on the coffee table between them, its disturbing pages a focal point they couldn't ignore. Arguments broke out, sparked by fear. Ava wanted to leave immediately, storm or not. Mark argued it was suicidal to drive the mountain roads blind in this. Ricky advocated drinking until they passed out, a final, familiar solution. Mia just stared at the journal, whispering, "It knows we're here. It's tasting our fear." Jade, her nerves frayed to breaking, made a decision. "We have to do it." The ritual Silas implied. "Not my stupid group therapy. The real one. From the book." "Are you insane?" Ava snapped. "You want to play with something out of that thing? We're already playing with it." Jade shot back, tears of frustration in her eyes. "It's playing with us. That circle, that locket. It's for someone. What if it's for us next?" The book says confession, truth, breaks its hold. It's the only thing that makes sense. A vicious debate ensued, fear and old resentments boiling over. In the midst of it, the lights, the generator-powered lights, flickered once, twice, and died, plunging them into darkness save for the guttering fire and the beam of a single flashlight Pete held. In that profound black silence, they heard it. Not the wind. A footstep. In the hallway outside the room. Heavy, deliberate, crunching on the grit of the old floorboards. It was not the light step of Silas returning. This was a weight that made the house itself seem to groan. The beam of Pete's flashlight, shaking violently, swept to the open doorway. Nothing was there, but the cold intensified, rushing into the room like an invisible tide, making the fire shrink and dim. The very air pressure changed, ears popping. And from the darkness of the hall, a sound drifted to them. A low, rhythmic exhalation, like stone grinding on stone, or the slow, patient breath of something that had been waiting a very, very long time. The walker was no longer just a story in a journal. It was in the house, and it was coming for its due. The breath from the hallway held them in a paralytic grip. Time stretched, thin and brittle. The firelight, now their only defense, painted monstrous, leaping shadows on the walls, each one a potential shape of the thing that waited just beyond sight. The grinding breath stopped. A deeper silence followed, one that was listening, tasting the fear in the room like a fine wine. It was Mia who moved first. With a choked sob that was half terror, half resolve, she lunged for the journal on the table, pulling it to her chest as if it were a shield. The motion broke the spell. Pete swung his flashlight beam frantically across the doorway, the circle of light revealing only empty, dark space. "It's messing with us," Ava whispered, her voice stripped of its earlier arrogance, raw and young. "Psychology. Infrasound. Old houses make noises." As if in reply, a door upstairs slammed shut with a force that shook dust from the ceiling beams. Not the wind. The wind howled outside. This was inside. Containment. Panic, pure and electric, finally took over. "We need to get out," Ricky yelled, stumbling towards the front door. He wrenched it open, only to be met with a solid wall of howling, white oblivion. The blizzard had erased the world beyond the portico. To step out was to vanish. He slammed the door shut, leaning against it, chest heaving. "The cellar," Mark said, his practical mind racing for solutions. "Maybe there's another way out. A root cellar, an old delivery entrance." The memory of the ash circle and the cold pocket flashed in all their minds. The cellar was not a refuge. It was a locus. "No," Jade and Mia said in unison. "Trapped." The word hung unspoken. They were trapped with the thing Silas had warned them about, the entity their own buried crime had apparently summoned. The journal's words echoed in Jade's mind. "It seeks the rot beneath the varnish." The lights flickered back on suddenly, the generator coughing to life. The stark electric light was more blinding than the dark had been. The room was empty save for them, but the cold remained, and the feeling of a presence just recently departed, like the negative space after a flashbulb. "We have to talk," Jade said, her voice hollow but steady. "Now, before it comes back." "Talk about what?" Ava shot back, hugging herself. "The weather." "You know about what?" Jade screamed, the composure she'd maintained for a year shattering. "About the girl. About the road. About us leaving her there in the ditch." The forbidden words, spoken aloud, hit the room like a physical blow. Ricky slid down the wall by the door, burying his face in his hands. Mia began to cry silently, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her face. Pete looked at the floor, jaw clenched. "We swore," Mark said quietly, pleadingly. "We swore never. And look where that oath has brought us." Jade gestured wildly at the house around them. "It's here, Mark. It's here because we've been screaming our guilt into the universe every single day for a year without making a sound." Silas was right. The truth is the only ritual left. What followed was not a calm confession, but a painful, ugly excavation. Forced by a terror greater than the fear of prison or social ruin, the story tumbled out in jagged pieces, each person revealing the facet of the night that haunted them most. Mia went first, her voice a thin thread. "I was in the back with Ricky. I saw her face in the headlights, just for a second. She looked surprised. Not scared yet, just surprised. I dream about that look. I wake up and I think, she didn't even have time to be afraid before we took everything." She revealed the sleeping pills she'd been stealing from her mother, the constant urge to just make the dreams stop. Pete spoke through gritted teeth, his confession aimed at the floor. "I was navigating. I told Mark the back road would be faster, clearer. I was wrong. I was always trying to be the smart one, the one with the shortcut. My shortcut killed her. He talked of the rage he'd poured into his breakup with Ava, using their fights as a distraction from the self-loathing that ate at him. Ricky, still on the floor, mumbled into his knees. I was handing around the flask. I'd spiked the punch at the party. I made sure everyone was loose. I wanted it to be a fun night. I'm always trying to make it fun. He looked up, his eyes red and ruined. I made her last seconds a blur for us. We were too drunk to even understand what we'd done until it was miles behind us. His drinking wasn't a habit. It was a daily attempt to replicate that blessed, guilty numbness. Ava's confession was fury. I was the one who said, "Drive." After we hit her, after we stopped, I rolled down my window and I heard a sound, a wet, ragged breath. And I said, "Drive, Mark, for God's sake, drive. If we stay, our lives are over." She glared at them all, defiant in her shame. I chose us over her. I'd do it again. That's the monster I am. I saved myself. She revealed the string of empty, destructive relationships she'd pursued, trying to find someone who would punish her the way she felt she deserved. Mark's was the simplest and the heaviest. My hands were on the wheel. I felt the thump. I saw her in the rear view, a heap in the red of our taillights. And I kept driving because Ava was right. My future, law school, my parents, it all flashed before my eyes. I valued it more than her life. He spoke of the anxiety attacks he hid, the way he'd clung to Jade not out of love, but out of a desperate need for an accomplice who wouldn't judge him. Finally, Jade, the organizer. I cleaned the car. The next morning at that 24-hour wash, I scrubbed the bumper where the paint was scuffed. I found a tiny piece of thread from her coat, caught in the trim. I burned it. I destroyed the evidence. I made it clean. I made us safe. Her voice broke. I've been trying to clean it up ever since, trying to organize us, fix us, make a ritual to wipe the slate. But you can't clean this. All you can do is look at the stain and say its name. As each confession spilled out, a strange thing happened. The oppressive cold in the room seemed to pause. It didn't recede, but it stopped its aggressive advance. The electric lights hummed steadily. The house held its breath, listening. They were raw, exposed, sitting in the crater of their shared atrocity. There was no forgiveness, not from each other, not from themselves. Just a horrific, glaring clarity. Then, the flashlight in Pete's hand, which had been off, clicked on by itself. Its beam, seemingly of its own volition, swept across the room and settled on the locket he had placed on the mantelpiece. The silver gleamed. A voice, not from any of them, but seeming to come from the very walls, the floor, the air itself vibrated through the room. It was not a human voice. It was the sound of roots cracking stone, of wind through deep caves, of a glacier calving. It formed one word, thick with the weight of ages. More. It wasn't satisfied. Their confession of the act was not the whole truth. It wanted the root, the why beneath the what. Terrified, they looked at each other. What more was there? Mia, in a whisper, understood. The lie we tell ourselves. The reason we think makes it okay. And so they dug deeper into the ugly marrow of their own souls. They confessed not just the action, but the cowardice that fueled it. They confessed to the secret relief they'd all felt when they decided not to call for help, the relief of self-preservation. They confessed to the times in the past year they'd seen news reports about a missing young woman from a neighboring county and quickly changed the channel. They confessed to secretly blaming each other to make their own guilt feel lighter. They confessed the most disgusting truth of all, that in their darkest moments, they had all, at least once, wished the girl had never been on that road at all, making her death a nuisance, an inconvenience to their lives. It was brutal, soul-rending. Ava vomited into a wastebasket. Ricky wept uncontrollably. Jade held Mia as she shook. When the last vile, honest syllable faded, the cold vanished. Not gradually, but instantly, like a switched-off current. The fire roared back to life, warmth flooding the room. The oppressive, listening feeling was gone. The house was just a house again, old, cold, but inert. In the sudden, shocking normality they sat, hollowed-out shells. The front door opened. Silas stood there, not covered in snow, as if he'd been waiting in a pocket of calm. He surveyed their broken faces, the tear-streaked filth, the palpable void where their secret had once festered. "It is done," he said, not as a question. "What was it?" Mark asked, his voice ragged. "A consequence," Silas replied. "A manifestation of the debt your silence incurred. Truth is the only currency it accepts. You have paid. For now." He walked to the mantel, picked up the locket, and held it. This belonged to Alara Vance. She vanished from a farmstead 5 miles hence, 122 winters ago. Her lover lied, swore he'd been with friends. Her family lied, said she'd run off to the city. The town lied, whispering of her loose character. The weight of those lies. It drew the walker then, too. It took the lover first, then the father who called her a whore. It settled the balance. He placed the locket back down. "Your lies were different, but the weight was the same. You have spoken yours. The balance is restored." "Will it come back?" Mia asked. "The walker is always there, in the space between truth and lie," Silas said. "Whether it notices you again depends on what you build with the truth you now hold." As the first gray light of dawn bleached the edges of the blizzard-scoured sky, they packed in silence. There were no goodbyes to Silas. He was already gone. They drove down the mountain on roads now just heavy with snow, the world quiet and new. They did not go to the police that day or the next. The confessions spoken to a supernatural entity did not translate to a legal affidavit. The fear of prison was now intertwined with a deeper, more existential terror. But something had shifted. A week later, an anonymous donation, pooling a significant portion of each of their savings, was made to a charity supporting victims of hit-and-run accidents and their families. Another was made to a missing persons advocacy group in the name of Alara Vance. They did not stay friends. The bond forged in guilt and sealed in terror was not one that could sustain a normal life. They drifted apart, but this time without the poisonous secret tugging at them. The silence between them was no longer a prison. It was simply distance. Jade sold the jewelry she'd used to fund the trip and started volunteering at a crisis hotline. Mark, after a breakdown, left law school and began studying social work. Pete sought out a rigorous therapy program. Ava, in a stunning move, reconciled with her estranged mother and began working at the family's struggling restaurant, finding solace in mundane, honest labor. Ricky checked into a rehab facility, this time not for a temporary fix, but a real one. Mia finally told her doctor about the dreams and the pills, beginning a long, painful path of proper treatment. They never spoke of that longest night at Blackwood Estate again. Not to each other, not to anyone. But in the quiet moments of their lives, in the dark just before sleep, they sometimes felt not a cold breath, but a simple, unblinking awareness. A reminder that every lie cast a shadow, and some shadows had teeth. They had looked into the face of the truth that walked, and it had, in its merciless way, set them free to build a life worth living, one honest, painful brick at a time.